Good evening,
I
sir.
guess we can start.
Hello, Ritam. Good evening.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Indronil Shauli, right?
Hello, sir. Good evening. It's absolute pleasure that you are
Good evening.
on Victorian Sundays.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Ritam, I guess we can start, right?
Yes. We can start. If you are okay with it, then we can start the session.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Shauli, would you like to introduce? I think Shauli is having some internet issues because Shauli, you are not audible right now. Uh, just wait a few more minutes and we are starting. Thank you
Okay.
so much, sir, for joining with us. And it's like an absolute honor for us to have you
Yeah.
today with Victorian Vanguard. Okay, Shauli is back.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry for the internet issues that I'm facing. So today we are having this talk like Victorian Sundays, like we usually do on every Sunday. And today we are gathered here to have this enriching talk by Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanick. I know he needs no introduction, but for the convenience, I'm introducing him. So, Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik is an assistant professor at the Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature and the Center for Translation and Literary Geography at the University of Calcutta. He is also the winner of Sahitya Akademi Award in Translation in 2023. Today we are here because Sir is going to deliver a lecture titled Inheritance of Eklavya, Bengali Translators in British Empire. We are honored to have you, Sir, here with us. And yeah, so we can go ahead from here.
Thank you, Shauli. Shauli, Ritam, Indronil. I thank you all for getting me this opportunity to talk about translation in this platform, Victorian Vanguard. Yeah, today when we were talking about the topic, so we were discussing that I will talk about 19th century translation mainly, the what covers the Victorian era in Bengal, and I was thinking of having some questions and lecture to be in discussion mode. So if you have any question, meanwhile you can ask me, or how should we proceed, Ritom? I mean, should we talk first? Then we'll have question, or
Okay, so I think if you first give an introduction and then we will start the
okay,
session with
okay,
conversation mode.
okay. Right. So see, I mean, Bengal has a long history of translation. It begins with the medieval period in the 12th century, 13th century, and in our recorded history, we find that Maladar Boshu is the first translator of literature in Bengali literature, and he translated Bhagavad Purana into Bengali, which is Sri Krishna Vijay in 12th, 13th century. But the entire medieval period of Bengal, I mean, before 1800, we had a rich tradition of translation, and we observed translation from Sanskrit, Persian, Farsi, and Arabic. So we had a cosmopolitan kind of culture in Bengali, and we had translation by different people who belong to lower strata of the society. And interestingly, medieval translation was a kind of translation of community work. So it was not for any individual or any individual purpose, but it was for the community, it was for the welfare of the community. And during 18th century, we found that Ram Mohan Rai, who was a pioneer in translation also. He is pioneer for different other causes, but he is also pioneer of modern translation. He continuously translated from Persian, English, Sanskrit, and also he has original work in Persian, and other languages also. So it was the time of formation of Bengali prose or the discursive language in Bengali, and throughout the 18th and 19th century, Bengali translators were trying to make Bengali language more efficient for mm, knowledge practicing. It is not only for the creative writing, but it was for practicing knowledge as a whole. If you see the history of Bottala translation in 19th century, especially in the during the time of Victorian period in English, after 1837, it was started before 1837, but after 1837, especially in 1850s, 1860s, till the first half of 1900, I mean 1910 or 1920, we can find that Bottala, besides translating literature from different languages, they were very much keen to translate text from law. I mean, the legal text and the government notifications, government directives into Bangla and other Indian languages. And also, they were very keen to translate medical text, the anatomy of body, right? And the basic medical texts were translated from English into Bengali. So it was quite interesting to observe that how the 19th century Bortola publishing sector, they focused not only on literature but also on medical text. And nowadays, if you see that UGC and various other government agencies, government organizations, they are continuously focusing on knowledge book translation. But we already have our history and method of translating knowledge book, right? Because the school book society also translated several texts for introducing in schools, and those include knowledge texts, especially, I mean, the book of science, the grammar, medical science, and also the text of books of law. So that is quite interesting. But the one I mean matter of regret is, in our translation studies in our country, we hardly focus on this history of translation, because we are not so much into this historical development of translation, but we are more into literary translation and theorizing literary translation. But that is also not about the non-canonical text, right? And we did not focus much on the translations after life within the community, how community interacted with each translated text. See, 19th century Bortola publishing, they continuously published Musolmani Sahitya, Islamic literature. But again, it is a bit problematic, because Shukumar Sen argued that it is not Islamic literature. But what I mean, there is a difference between literature produced by a author, Muslim author, and Islamic literature. Islamic literature is about the theology, Islamic theology. And when we talk about Islamic literature from Bortola in 19th century, it is not about the Islamic theology, but it is about the romantic literature. It is about the romance, romantic literature, and it is also about translating the classics from Arabic and Persian languages. And those actually built the memory of childhood memory of 19th century and early 20th century Bengali people. So Shukumar Sen particularly focused on this, that how Bortola translation made almost for more than 100 years, the Bortola translation made the childhood memory of the Bengali people, irrespective of their religious identity, like the Laila story of Laila Majnu, Hatim Tai. All these were extremely popular, and as Bortola was for the common people, it was beyond the Bhadralok cultural territory. Therefore, they used to circulate their books widely among the common people in villages, in semi-urban areas, and all. So those translation had very strong afterlife, and community has a deep bonding with those literary texts, and this is how the community memory have been made with those translations. So simply you cannot call it the Musolmani literature or so. That was Shukumar Sen's argument. And later also Lutfar and Anisuzzaman, all these scholars, they called that these are the multilingual. This is about the multilingual literary space what was created in this Chitpur, Shobha Bajar, Jora Shako, all these Ahiri Tola, all these area. the publishing houses on these areas, they actually created a cosmopolitan a literary sphere with translation, and that was beyond the bhadralok or bureaucratic institutions of literary translations. Like it was outside of Asiatic Society, it was outside of Sri Rampur Mission or Fort William College or Calcutta University, right? So this is how a beautiful cosmopolitan literary space was made through translation, and people had deep connection, deep interaction with those literary texts. So it is one of the interesting thing about 19th century translation in Bengali. And also another thing is the translation of the knowledge text. We know about Vidyasagar. Vidyasagar is mainly famous for his translated works. Right. I mean, he was a great social reformer and a great human being. He has a significant contribution in Bengali society. But as a literary personality, he is mainly famous for his translated works. He translated significantly. I mean, throughout the English Victorian age, he translated Betal Panchavingshuti from Boital Pachisi in 1847. He translated Shakuntala from Abhigyan Shakuntalam in 1854. Then he translated Bodhodaya. He translated Marshman's History of Bengal into Bangla, and it was translated in 1848, and Bodhodaya was Chambers' Rudiment of Knowledge. So most of the text Vidyasagar translated were for the school teaching. Therefore, these translation actually created the primary knowledge of the Bengali children. So we have to think translation in this way also, that how translation built our community epistemology. So Vidyasagar had a significant role, and along with Vidyasagar, other peoples were also there, like Ramnarayan Torkoratno, Hemchandra Bandyopadhyay, Rangolal Bandyopadhyay, Nobin Chandra Sen. All these people also translated significantly, and it was also the time when different kind of literary genres were introduced into Bengali literature, like the lyric poetry. So lyric poetry is not it is a result of continuous translation of European literature, and also it is not only about the translation of European literature, because it is about the inheritance of our medieval literary tradition, because we never differentiated between poetry and song. So the beautiful songs of our culture is considered as beautiful poetry, and beautiful poetry is also a beautiful song. I mean, Git Gobindo of Joydev is, you can recite, you can sing the entire Vaishnava Padavali, you can recite, you can sing. So our lyric poetry in 19th century is actually a cross-cultural genre. Genre means cross-cultural. The history of development of genre is always cross-cultural. So it is a cross-cultural genre. It is a result of the inheritance of medieval lyric poetry, medieval lyricism, the culture of lyricism, and also the translation of Dryden, translation of Shelley, Keats, and all. Because the great poets of 19th century, like Rangolal Bandyopadhyay, Hemchandra Bandyopadhyay, Nobin Chandra Sen, and of course Rabindranath Tagore, but he comes later, they all translated the great poets of Europe, and this is how a strong ground of in Bengali lyric poetry has been formed in 19th century Bengal. So 19th century Bengali translation is actually it is about inheritance of medieval literary culture and translation culture, and it is also about creating cosmopolitan multilingual space. It is also about the life of literature and translation with the community. It is also about translating knowledge text and medical text and legal text. It is also about the role of the translation in making of community memory and the community epistemology. And it is also very, very important because it introduced different kind of literary genres, not only in Bengali literature, but across the country. And it is quite interesting that Bengal, being the capital of British India, the most of the European literary genres were translated via Calcutta. and the Bengali for other Indian languages. So it is, I mean, 19th century translation history in Bengal is quite fascinating and interesting. And it also carried the medieval translation heritage. Like we know that Ramayana, Mahabharata were translated into medieval Bengal, and we have lots of translation, not only the Kashiram Das's Mahabharata or Krittibash Ojha's Ramayana, but we have hundreds of Ramayana and Mahabharata translated into Bengali language from different parts of Bengal, right? And that heritage, that culture actually continued in 18th century, 19th century also. And we know about Kali Prashanna Singho, right? Kali Prashanna Singho's Mahabharata, because the most popular Mahabharata was published by Bardhaman Rajsabha, Royal Court, and it was not available during the time of Kali Prashanna Singho. So Kali Prashanna Singho from 1860 to 66, he started to translate Mahabharata into Bengali, and that made him, eternal figure. Made him survive in Bengali literature forever. So that is quite interesting. That it is also about the tradition which was continued from medieval period to modern period. So the entire 19th century is actually curious case study for the history of translation, and I think it is curious case study for entire world, that how it accommodated multiple directions of human interaction and the creativity. So yeah, this is, I mean, briefly about introduction, and we can discuss, and we can proceed further. Yeah.
So I guess, sir, we can begin with the title of today's talk. The title is Inheritance of Eklavya. It's a very catchy and mesmerizing title. Would you, sir, like to shed a bit of a light as to why you chose to name the
Yeah.
title
Yeah.
Inheritance of Eklavya?
Actually, I mean, thank you for asking this question. Actually, it was very purposeful use of these words, that inheritance of Ekalavya. This is not my idea. Actually, I got this idea from a very famous poet and translator, Sudhindranath Datta. Sudhindranath Datta translated modern European poetry in 1850s into Bengali, and the title of that book was Pratidhwani. It is quite interesting that he was translating modern European poetry into Bengali, but the name of the title of the book was Pratidhwani. And the introduction of that book, it was only 2.5 page long introduction, and in that introduction of that book, he told the method and experience of translating poetry, and he told that it is not possible. It is not possible to translate poetry. Why it is not possible? I mean, we all know that it is not possible to translate poetry, but in other side it is possible. So why it is not possible? Because Sudhindranath Datta's definition of poetry was it is the inseparable unity of utterances and realization. So one side it is the utterances, and another side it is the realization. Ekaki gayoker nahe to gan. So this is how poetry is created. So as it is about utterances and realization, it is not possible to transform into any other language. Though there are bit similarities of compound words between German and Bengali, the adjectives of French and Bengali, but then also it is not possible. Therefore, as he was translating for the Bengali readers, he believed that it should be more Bengali. The poetry should look like more Bengali. And after continuous editing of his drafts, he found that it is not the poems as it is written by the European poet. It is therefore Pratidhwani, echo of those poets. Therefore, he used this word that Ami Ekalavya Somporko Patiechi. The relation between the source author and me as a translator is a relation of Ekalavya. So learning the poetry is a distant learning. The translation, the entire process of translation is a distant process. Therefore, the relation is Ekalavya relation. because I do not have any personal or direct connection with the poets, but it is all about the distance learning. And we know, right, that when we try to uh, get a meaning of a literary text, the entire geography or environment helps a lot, because those are so given that we hardly think of those. That suppose we are reading a poem which is about the uh, flowers of the springtime of Bengal. For example, I was just discussing a collection of poems, Kushumer Mash by Ajit Dotto, in my MA class, and it is all about the flowers of summer and the springtime, right? So it is not much difficult for the Bengali readers to get the meaning of the poems, because they are getting all the flowers uh, surrounded by them, right? That Amoltash, Ashok, and Krishnachura, and all these flowers are there. But some flowers are archaic flowers. You cannot often find those flowers in Kolkata. And when you are not finding those flowers in Kolkata, it is very difficult to get the meaning of the poem, because you have to go back to Google or the encyclopedia or the botany book or so. So when Shubhra Dotto was translating modern European poets into Bengali, he was actually establishing a distant relation with the European poets. That is, the translator is always Ekalavya. Now, why I use this word? Because Subin Dotto is talking about in the second half of 20th century, 1956 perhaps, right? But why I use this term for 19th century translation? Because see, translation in Bengal or across our civilization, the conscious effort of translation is actually the result of curse. We know the story of Tower of Babel. I mean, it was curse, therefore the thousands of languages were emerged and we required translation. But in Bengal also, there was a strict restriction against translating text from Sanskrit into Bengali, that Ashtadosh Puranani Ramasya Charitani Manava Bhashayang Srutva Rourav Narakang Brojet, which means if you listen the 18 Puranas and the life story of Ramas into Bengali, then you will be sent to worst hell, that is Rourav, right? So it is about the curse. And I understand, after reading Shudindranath, I understand all the translators are actually Ekalavyas, because they are cursed, they belong far from the original author, and they are not so adored by the imagination of the idea of translation. Therefore, it is about the inheritance of Ekalavya, that since the time of Mahabharata and the medieval Bengal, and also in modern Bengal. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure Ritam and Shauli would be eager to ask you questions.
Yeah.
That was
So I, I
really
yeah.
nice saying, because when I did my course from Sentil in Jadavpur University, I was introduced to this idea that whenever we think about translation, we usually think the first author, I mean the writer who has already written the text, is kind of primary, and the person who is writing is more like a secondary. That is how we usually perceive, and that is why the title is going with it, because that is not the case actually, because translation is also a very creative endeavor. Okay, Shauli, would you like to ask a question? I think I interrupted you, so sorry.
Yeah, no, 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 it's all right. I mean, I actually had a question regarding the title only. I thought it must, I mean, of course, I understand the entire translation endeavor that you have put into it. I was also thinking that since you have also translated Sharan Kumar Limbales towards the aesthetics of the literature, and since Eklavya in the recent arena and the Italian of literature is seen as a tribal figure who has faced ostracization and otherness. So, beginning the journey from the otherness faced by a Dalit and theorizing it through the otherness faced by a tribal who who stays outside this entire arena of like caste system. The tribal doesn't exist in the caste system, so the oppression is twofold oppression. So I wanted to know your answer to it also, like if you want to relate it to translation.
Okay. See, the when we talk about Dalit literature, or the condition of the Dalit and the condition of the tribal, yeah, tribals. Dalit is about the I mean, it is about the resistance against the caste system of the Hindu society, and tribal does not belong to the Hindu society. They have their own religious practices and all, completely different race. But when we talk about Dalit, it is not only about the resistance of the people against the caste Hindu, but it also comes as a philosophy of resistance. It also
Definitely.
comes as metaphor of resistance. Therefore, many people who are oppressed, they find this idea as a tool of emancipation for any kind of oppressed people, right? When we translate, it depends that from which language we translate, in what language we translate, and which publisher is going to publish my translation, right? So that actually defines the status of the book which is translated, and also to some extent the readership of the book. All the languages are not equally treated. See, translation is extremely celebrated. I mean, creative expression of today's world. It is extremely celebrated, but it is extremely celebrated when you are translating into a canonical language, or uh, comparatively powerful language. Should be English, French,
Exactly.
Bengali, Hindi, because all these powerful languages have, their political economy to celebrate a translator or literary author, but not it does not happen for all the languages. So there are kind of, marginalization of the translators in
Yeah.
our society, in our literary culture. That always happens.
Yeah. Oh, in our masters also, I think we read this article by Susie Tharu on translation, the politics of translation. There we also had to read that how the act of translating a text from a colonizer's language, or from the language of the dominant class, is also an act of resistance
Right.
in a language, yeah, which is not. And I think that is what you also meant. And
Right.
yeah, thank you for the answer, sir.
One thing just I want to add with this, when Tagore was translating Macbeth, it was not complete translation of Shakespeare's Macbeth, and also
Yeah.
Tagore did it in very young age. So it was a poetic translation of Macbeth and incomplete translation of Macbeth. But Tagore, in his young age, he dared to translate Macbeth, and Macbeth in his own way. So in that case, translation itself is a mode of resistance against this colonial lord, right?
Right.
That Shakespeare
Exactly.
was perceived as a great author, playwright, poet, and also a colonial lord. But Tagore dared to translate him in his own way. That quite interesting.
Yeah. So it's just indigenous people, and specifically any form of indigenous people translating the text which come from the colonizer's tongue, also even the Latin American
Right.
translation, this becomes mode through which the decolonization happens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, sir.
That's true.
Sir, I guess I can ask the next
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, so since we're talking about this, the translation beyond the Bhadralok culture, and like
Mhm.
there is this coalition between like this Fort William College and Shirampur Missionary College, and the other hand, there is a different sort of translation. So, would you care to talk a bit about the readership of the translation? Is a question, what is a relevant translation applicable to this like two modes of translation that are coming into 19th century Bengal?
Right, right. See, when the Srirampur Mission or Fort William College, they mainly translated text for the pedagogic purpose, for teaching the civilians, right? And there was Vernacular Literature Society. So Vernacular Literature Society, whatever text they had to suggest, or they published, mostly those were the translations. And in 19th century, there were uh, one important phase and genre of translation, that is about the translation of play. Like the Prabodh Chandroday. Prabodh Chandroday is the one of the first Sanskrit play which was translated from Sanskrit into Bengali in 1822. But interestingly, before that, it was translated into English in 1812, and someone called Mahatab Chand Ghosh, he translated this Prabodh Chandroday in 1925. So, 19th century the whatever literature was translated into 19th century, most of the literary text had a long life because they were included in pedagogic structure for teaching in school, teaching in colleges, and people had their associated memories with these texts. Therefore, these translations were very deeply rooted into the culture and the community epistemology, what I was saying. So that is one thing. And Asiatic society, they focused to they focus translating literature from Sanskrit, from Persian, from Arabic, and also from English, because they were trying to imagine the Asia, the Orient. Because William Jones, when he came to India, before coming to India, he studied extensively about India, and he came with a pride that I have to know much better than any European about India. Therefore, he did lot of study on India. And when he studied about India, that time there were very few books which were translated into European languages. I mean, before Jones came India, so William Jones did not have much books with him. But whatever books he had and whatever sources he had, the East India Company documents and all, he studied a lot to know India and to become more powerful, the Indologist or knowledgeable person about India before coming to India. So Asiatic society, when it was established, it translated to create an idea of Orient, right? But they also, I mean, these people, Orientalist or Indologist, William Carey and all, they started translating Bible into Bengali. I mean, the multiple versions of Bible came into Bengali, but none of them were very much popular, right? Why those texts were not much popular? See, there is a problem. Not problem, challenges in translating theological text, because the lot of restriction and the serious human emotion is associated with translating theological text or religious text. For Bible translation, see, it was the time of the formation of Bengali prose also. And for Bible translation, what happened, they had to follow word to word translation mode. And when they started translating by word to word, they lost the bakspondo, the rhythm of Bengali language, right? So therefore, those translations were not much popular. But in other side, when people were translating Bhagavad, Mahabharata or Ramayana, they had freedom. Those literary texts were very, very much popular, right? Because they had creative freedom and the people had access to that Bengali language. But for Bible, it did not happen. Therefore, none of the Bible translation, the translated Bible into Bengali, was much popular. So, yeah, did I answer your question? Because I thought I deviated. Yeah.
No, sir, you did, but yeah, we guess we are getting into a lot of points, and that is good, sir, for the purpose of discussion.
Okay, but I mean, any other thing you had that you asked, but I did not respond.
No, like my follow-up question would have been like what I was thinking, that where these translations also, I might be wrong, sir, here, but like were instrumental in the formation of the Babu culture, like this anglicized class of people or social hierarchy that translation was creating in 19th century Bengal.
Right. Yes. That is very, very interesting question. See, for Babu culture or the Bhadralok culture, it was mainly the imitation of English, right? And imitation of Europe. There is a fascinating essay by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay in the collection of Bibido Prabandho, first part. Right. In that Bibido Prabandho first part, Bankim Chandra wrote one essay. It is called Onukaran. So it was actually the kind of reception of discursive, the argumentative position of Rajnarayan Boshu about the modern Bengali. So Bankim Chandra was defining modern Bengali, and Bankim Chandra claimed that it is Adbhut Jontu, the strange animal, the modern Bengali is. And he argued about the culture of imitation and why and how Bengali was an emerging epistemic category in 19th century. So Bengali is, I mean, identified as Bengali since, 17, 18th century, because before that it was the Bengal was not popular, it was the Gaud. So 17th century, yeah. So but epistemic, a conscious epistemic category, Bengali as a epistemic category, it emerged mainly in 18th 19th century, later half of 18th century and 19th century. So interestingly, Bankim Chandra's argument was that Bengali is a imitated cultural or racial category, right? As an also as an epistemic category, it is cross-cultural, it is hybrid, right? So Bankim Chandra was in favor of Anukaran or imitation. Bankim Chandra told that imitation of a greater talent is always desirable. But the problem is when you imitate a poor person who is not talented, because the content and the mode of imitation both become very very poor. So you have to imitate the greater person and all. Bankim Chandra started writing an interpretation, translation, like the Tika Bhashya of Bhagavad Gita. Bankim Chandra argued that why should I translate or interpret Bhagavad Gita? There is Shankar Bhashya. Shankar Bhashya is celebrated as the interpretation of Gita. Bankim Chandra argued that it is not possible to understand Gita without interpretation, without Tika or Bhashya. Therefore, I started translating. Sorry. So, therefore, it is required to have a Tika Bhashya or interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. Though Shankar Bhashya or some other Bhashya is there, what is the need of my intervention? Because Bankim Chandra told that those old interpretations does not have power to reach to the modern Bengali, because it is completely a different category. It lost its root. This modern Bengali is not connected with the medieval Bengal, medieval knowledge tradition. They are completely disconnected. So they need a different kind of discursive language to understand an ancient text. And who will do that? The person who knows the ancient India and the modern India better. So it was assumed by Bankim Chandra himself that it is he. It is he himself who could translate. So this is quite interesting that this is how translation actually helped to build the epistemology of Bhadralok and help to connect the Bhadralok or the modern Bengali as a cultural community with the medieval and the ancient Bengali. Translation had a significant role to connect these different Bengalis of different period of history. So yeah, thank you for this question.
Thank you very much, sir, for explaining it in such a wonderful way. This has been a question in my mind for a very long time, but I really got to see that angle from your words, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Sir, pardon, could you please name the essay once more, if possible?
Anukaran, it
Yeah.
is in the part 1 of Vividho Prabandha.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I have a question, and that
Yeah,
is,
sure.
do you think that these Bengali translators acted like cultural messenger, or I can say like found ways to quietly resist British rule through their translations? I mean, is there anything?
Yes. See, 19th century, there was a continuous translation practice, which is the continuation of medieval period, and that is translation of Perso-Arabic literary tradition. And when these Perso-Arabic literatures were translated, those actually helped. The people to resist against European education system and the English literary culture. This is very very interesting, and there was a conscious initiative by various intellectuals and powerful people like Jomindars, Raja or Nawabs and all, to preserve their medieval knowledge or literary culture during the modern time. So it was a kind of resistance against monolithic European education system and their literary culture, knowledge culture. Also, the translation of European literature into Bengali was a resistance against the mode of instruction of knowledge in higher education, because through translation they all were preparing a Bengali language for higher education. And what was resulted in the first half of 20th century, when Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee introduced a completely new kind of academic discipline in the University of Calcutta, and that is Indian Vernacular Department. That Ashutosh Mukherjee's argument was that higher study is possible in Indian languages. So it is a long history of translation and the contribution of the translators of 19th century to prepare Bengali for higher education, for higher learning, both literary knowledge and other knowledge. And that was a very conscious mode of resisting colonial pattern of epistemic distribution. So that is very, very significant.
And sir, I think apart from the act of resistance, the act of translation also worked as a mediation, as a mode of mediation, as a mode of third space also. This in between space between the colonizer and the colonized, where the articulation is happening. The articulation between the two bodies, and the translator worked as a mode of resistance, also as a mode of a mediation.
Exactly, exactly. Because to respond to your observation, there is another interesting essay that also I discuss in my translation studies class, that is Tarjoma by Pramotho Chaudhuri. And in that essay, Pramotho Chaudhuri's argument was that a successful making of modern Bengali community is only possible through translation of ancient India and modern Europe. So, continuous interaction of the Bengalis with ancient India and modern Europe is extremely required. With that, the successful, I mean, the modern Bengali as an epistemic and cultural category will be emerged.
Thank you so much, sir. So now the stage is onto the audience. You can raise your hand and you can ask sir a question. So does anyone have a question that they would like to ask? Okay. Okay. So I think the audience they do not have any question as of yet. But I think we three of us we asked so many questions that they don't have any questions left. But yeah, sir, it was a very enriching lecture. I think this YouTube lecture video will be the video that I will try to go back more and often in order to help my research, because there will be part of translations that I'll also be involved in. So I think this will be very
I guess Shaul is stuck. But before
this
that, I would like to.
opportunity to have you on board.
Thank you, Shirley. Yeah,
But we are like,
Indrani, yeah.
yeah, we're like early like research scholars. So if we have missed any portion or part that you wanted to speak on or you wanted to address, you can speak on that maybe for like a short while
Okay,
if you
okay.
find it pertinent
Okay.
enough.
See, one another thing about 19th century translation is it is about introducing different ideas of translation. Like when Jyotirindranath Tagore was translating Molière's play from French into Bengali, he used an interesting term for his translation. It is chaya, Molièreর নাটকের ছায়া অবলম্বনে. And this chaya, which is shadow cannot be similar as the object, right? But that object is necessary to have that shadow. And shadow, by shadow or chaya, what Jyotirindra Tagore meant, it is about the adaptation. In today's translation studies, we called adaptation as translation, and adaptation was is quite popular, and it is being used since long time in film studies. But in translation studies also we use the term adaptation. So my point or argument is that if we look into the history of translation into various Indian languages, we can fascinating new perspectives on translation, and multiple definitions of translation we can have, right? That is that, therefore we need to look into the history of translation in various Indian languages, like the chaya. It is an interesting word. Also, as I told that there was community engagement, see, the translation also helped to build the professional theater. When Prasanna Kumar Thakur or Prasanna Kumar Tagore introduced Hindu theater also adapted various texts from Sanskrit and European languages for performance. And Oriental Seminary, it was a school. Oriental Seminary people also was very interested after seeing the Prasanna Thakur's Hindu theater. So they started Oriental theater in 1860s or so. 1853, 1850s. And for 6-7 years, they performed various plays by Shakespeare, and therefore they translated Shakespeare. And Shakespeare has a continuous adaptation in various Indian languages since 19th century. And the professional theatre also emerged with the translation of Sanskrit plays, and also with the plays by Shakespeare and other famous European playwright. So that is another interesting part of 19th century translation. And the most significant thing what I find, being a student of translation studies, that 19th century translation perspectives has whole lot of argumentative position and the philosophical position to offer translation studies to reshape the Eastern idea or the Indian, Asian ideas of translation. We actually have the resource to develop Indian school of translation or Indian school of translation thought. So that is one thing I wanted to share. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I guess we have
Shomendu is there. Shomendu raised hand.
yes, right.
Somindo, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
নমস্কার স্যার, আমি বাংলায় জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারি?
একদম একদম।
আচ্ছা, আপনি যে বলছিলেন যে মানে 18 শতকে 19 শতকে এই যে সাহিত্যকে সমাজ গঠনের বা চেতনা মানে টুল হিসেবে ব্যবহার করার যে একটা ভাবনা উঠে আসছে, সেটা তো মানে আমি যে টেরি ইগলটনের লেখা পড়েছিলাম আমরা, সেখানে উনিও বলেছিলেন যে মানে অষ্টাদশ শতকে যে যন্ত্র সভ্যতার যে আগমন হচ্ছে, সেখানেও মানে ধর্মীয় যে প্রতিষ্ঠানগুলো সেগুলো ভেঙে পড়ছে, এবং সেখানে লিটারেচারকে একটা টুল হিসেবে ব্যবহার করা হচ্ছে সমাজকে কনসলিডেট করার জন্য, স্টেটকে কনসলিডেট করার জন্য। তো এই একই ধারণার প্রতিচ্ছবি আমরা মানে বাংলা সাহিত্যেও দেখতে পাচ্ছি। মানে এই নতুন যে বাঙালি সমাজ গঠনের কথা আপনি যে বলছেন বঙ্কিমচন্দ্রের লেখায়, তিনি নিজেই নিজেকে সেই দায়িত্ব আরোপ করছেন। তার মানে এখানে আমরা মানে এই দুটো ভাবনার মধ্যে কতটা মানে সম্পর্ক দেখতে পাচ্ছি, আন্তঃসম্পর্ক, আমি সেইটা মানে বোঝার জায়গা ছিল একটু।
Thank you, Shomendu, for this question. Actually, Shomendu, I mean, those who do not have access to Bangla, for them, Shomendu wanted to know that what is the role of literature to structure a society and all. And it is common for different societies in human civilization that literature played a significant role to structure, to reshape the a community or the linguistic community, and yeah, linguistic community also, any kind of community identity. See, literature is such a creative expression what can describe the thing or the narrate the thing or tell the stories in extremely explicit way. Literature can accommodate many at a time. I mean, very few art forms has that power to be used for the common and accommodate so much varieties into a single text. Therefore, literature always played a more explicitly significant role in reshaping the society. If you see the medieval Bengal, uh, literature, or the more specifically translation, played a significant role to accommodate the lower caste Hindus in the Hindu society, because lower caste Hindus, they did not know Sanskrit, they did not have opportunity to learn the Sanskrit. Therefore, translators took this responsibility to translate the religious epistemology from Sanskrit into Bengali, and it was accessible for the common people. And it was not only about the translation of literature or the theological text, but it is also about translation a different empirical tradition into another language. Otherwise, that language was not prepared for that epistemological tradition. And this is how a kind of unity translators, through literary translation, they tried to build. In 19th century also, we can find such kind of initiatives. And in early 20th century, though Pramod Chaudhary, he belonged to both the Victorian period, and he survived later also. And when he wrote this essay, it was 1913. So technically it is not under Victorian period, but that was about the synthesis of his studies of 19th century and the medieval Bengal. And he found that the literature and literary translation is the only way what has strong epistemic power to unite the Bengali community, or the modern Bengali community, and to establish a particular identity for the community. So literature always played that role in different times in our society, across the civilization. So in Bengal also it happened. Yeah. Shomendu.
তাহলে কি স্যার মানে এরকম কোনো প্রমাণ আছে যে মানে, কারণ এই একই কথা মানে 19th সেঞ্চুরিতে এসে ম্যাথিউ আর্নল্ডও বলছেন যে লিটারেচারকেই, যেহেতু ধর্মীয় প্রতিষ্ঠানগুলো ব্যর্থ হচ্ছে, তাই লিটারেচারকেই এই রোলটা প্লে করতে হবে সমাজ গঠনের ক্ষেত্রে বা মানুষের চেতনা গঠনের ক্ষেত্রে। তাহলে তারা কি আমাদের এই যে আমাদের যে মানে লিটারেচারের যে হেরিটেজ, সেখান থেকে কি তারা কোথাও গিয়ে ইনফ্লুয়েন্স হচ্ছেন, এরকম কি কোনো প্রামাণ্য দলিল আছে?
হ্যাঁ, সৌমেন্দু, এই কোয়েশ্চেনটা খুব ইন্টারেস্টিং। দিস ইজ ভেরি ইন্টারেস্টিং কোয়েশ্চেন, ওয়েদার দ্য ইউরোপ or West is influenced by our epistemic tradition and all. There is one book by Amir Mustafi, right? Amir Mufti, Forget English. And in that book, Amir Mufti is arguing that often when we talk about Renaissance, when we talk about colonial modernity, often we argue that how India or the colonies were influenced by Europe, but we never read it in other way, how Europe was reshaped by us, by the Orient as an epistemic category. Right. So Orient as an, or East as an epistemic category, also reshaped Europe. So there are several kind of influences of Indian civilization, Indian knowledge in Europe. That is very important argument and observation we have to look into. And thank you for this question. Just one example. There was a very renowned translator, Amita Bose. Amita Bose was in Romania for a long time. First, she went with her husband, but she learned Romanian language and all, and she stayed back to Romania. And now all the current diplomat of Romania is incidentally the student of Amita Bose, because all of them learned Sanskrit or Bengali or Indian knowledge system by Amita Bose. So there was a national poet of Romania who was completely influenced by Upanishad. And when Eminescu, his name is Eminescu, and Amita Bose translated Eminescu's poems into Bengali. And if you read those Bengali translation, and if I cover the name of the poet Eminescu, you will tell me that it is written by Tagore. Interestingly, Tagore also was very much influenced by Upanishad. Eminescu also was very interested by Upanishad. What Amita Bose did, Amita Bose translated Tagore into Romanian and Eminescu into Bengali. And this is how her argument was. She was not only a translator, but she was a cultural ambassador, right? But my point is, in response to your question, is that this is how Europe is also influenced by Indian epistemology, Indian philosophy, Indian knowledge system, and all. And that is briefly the argument of Amir Mufti in Forget English, that we should look into the fact how Europe was reshaped by Indian knowledge system. Showing.
ধন্যবাদ স্যার।
Sir, I guess we have like not a question per se, but like Asrar Ahmed like wanted to thank you for this enriching lecture, and he wants if you can mention a book or two, I think in formative stage for translation studies.
Okay. So there are lots of books. One is by Lawrence Venuti, Translation Studies Reader. That is very, very important, and you will get free PDF of Translation Studies Reader by Lawrence Venuti. And also there is one handbook of translation by Jeremy Mundy. Jeremy Mundy's book is also very, very useful to be introduced with translation studies. There is one encyclopedia of translation studies published by Routledge that is also freely available. And if you want to know about Indian translation, you can read translation as Discovery by Sujit Mukherjee, translation as Recovery by Sujit Mukherjee, Citing Translation by Tejaswini Niranjana, and also there is one essay towards Indian translation theory by Indranath Choudhury, and that is available, freely available in Google. So you can start reading these articles and books. These will be very, very helpful for your preparing yourself for translation studies and all. For basic readings, these are very useful books.
Thank you very much, sir.
Also translation studies by Susan Bassnett. Yeah, that is another important book.
It was a really great and enriching lecture, and thank you so much, sir, for this lecture. One thing that I just observed is that whenever people use translation, they usually associate with this word lost. I have seen people saying like lost in translation or something like that. But I believe the opposite should happen. Instead of lost, I think through translation we are gaining. The original text is somewhat gaining meaning out of it. So, yes.
Yeah, actually, I have certain arguments about it. Who knows the lost in translation? See, if I have direct access to original language, I will not read the translation. Those people read the translation, they do not have access to the original language. So it bothers only the researchers who has to write a paper or MA dissertation or a PhD, or the translation trainer. They have to find that what is lost and nothing. Something. See, each text gives us a new interpretation. I can remember my English teacher in my school. Actually, I studied HS in college. So in college, he was teaching us The Listeners. That is there anybody there? That famous poem. So, and he told that when I was in school, it was in our syllabus, the part of it when he was in primary school. When he was in high school, it was there. When he was in HS section, it was there. When he came to English honors, it was there. And he told that in every phase of life, I studied The Listeners, and in every stage of life, it was different. So he was telling that story when I was in class 11. So it was quite fascinating to me. But it is very important now when I always face this question by many people that, oh, you are reading this in translation but not in original language and all. How many language one should know? Then you are direct conflict with the God. Because God knows that people will not be, human being will not be able to learn so many language. That is why he created so many language, as the Tower of Babel could not be made, right? So you are fighting with God. That will be terrific. So it is not possible to know all the language of the human civilization. That means translation is always gain. Nothing is lost, because you always change your interpretation. You always cross the boundary of your previous interpretation. And who can argue that I am reading a Tagore's poem and teaching it in a MA class.